Waiting for Superman. Next. Welcome to the Stan Simpson Show, a program about Connecticut people and compelling issues. Make it a point to drop in every week. When it comes to urban education reforms, some say it's like waiting for Superman to come and save the day. The problems outlined in a provocative documentary bearing that title are dire and pervasive. In Connecticut, the graduation rates in urban schools are less than 50%, and many who do graduate are not prepared for college. The prisons, meanwhile, have become a warehouse for functionally illiterate black and Latino men, most of whom do not have a high school diploma, and most of whom are from our urban centers. Folks, billions of dollars have been invested in urban schools. While there has been a smattering of encouraging results, the overarching feeling is that there lacks a sense of urgency. Today, we'll talk about education stakeholders and about solutions for improving urban education and the reality that there is no superhero to save the day. We're joined here, they have no capes on though, by Michael Sharp, CEO of Jamoke Academy in Hartford, a turnaround school, charter school. We have Jim Starr, the executive director of Achieve Hartford, education reform group. Danielle Smith, return visitor, become a regular now. She's one of our contributors, it seems like. The president of the Connecticut Black Alliance for Educational Options. So all of you saw the documentary?
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
Give me your lasting impression on what really hit home for you.
What hit home for me was that this is a problem that's huge. We know that. We've talked about that. But it was that it's solvable. And I think the immediacy, the urgency of our need to do something right now is what struck me. And Bayo actually screened this documentary in private
Your group,
settings.
Bayo, right.
Yes,
Okay.
Both in Hartford and in New Haven. So we had over 400 people go to the movies with us last week. And we got reactions from the audience. And that was the overwhelming sense that we know that this is solvable. We see the reality of this problem. We see the urgency, and everyone left, I think, feeling like they wanted to get to work on this right away.
So where do we start? Michael Sharp, you've done a turnaround at Jamoke Academy. Jim Starr, you're trying to do turnarounds in Hartford. Where do you start?
Well, personally, I think it starts with what Danielle talked about. It's that awareness that this problem is real and it exists, and it's just not something that's limited to the urban schools. Particularly in Connecticut, you have so many. You have several urban centers, but so many suburban areas, and the achievement gap that it tries to address is not necessarily limited to the urban districts, but so much of it is. And Waiting for Superman highlighted that, as they talked about in Houston and in New York and some of the other cities. So you have to start with the awareness, and you have to start with the fact that a lot of our school systems are broken and they need to be fixed, but you have to realize that there are solutions. And in Hartford, for example, they're doing some things, and they're doing some other great reform efforts in other parts of the country as well, and charter schools are part of that as well. But there are answers and there are solutions out there.
And it takes time. Michael Sharp, again, turnaround school, Jamoke. It took you 10 years to get really going. Where do you start?
I think the movie was depressing on one hand, but on the other hand, there's something that came out of that which was really beautiful that people could see, and that is it can be done. This is not rocket scientist stuff. This is not about turning America upside down. It's being done in New York. It's being done in Connecticut and other states with large groups of students who have been from poor performing schools. And so I was really encouraged by that.
So why can't it be duplicated then? Because it's very clear it can be done. You've done it, Homicide Academy in New York. You mentioned Chicago. Why isn't it being duplicated with more of a sense of urgency?
You need the will. You have to have the political will, the social will to put all of those pieces together. Reaching into pulling the parents into the system, making not that we're telling parents, but parents have to be part of what's happening. You have to set expectations, you have to bring in quality teachers, and then you have to stay on top of these things and follow it through from A to Z. You said it took us a long time to do this. It's not going to happen overnight. But you have to have that willpower to stay with it, because if you put those things into place, the accountability, the accessibility, assessments, quality teachers, and good leadership, your schools will turn around.
Okay, producer David Guggenheim is one of the founders here with this documentary. Here's what he had to say about Waiting for Superman.
Going to see the movie makes you realize that the stakes are really high. It's much worse than we thought. And it affects every neighborhood. Like some of these upper middle class neighborhoods where we think the schools are good are not as good as we thought.
All right, pretty profound. Let's start with some of the highlights, some of the headlines from the documentary. First off, I would say dropout academies. The reality that in a lot of these urban centers you have schools, high schools, where for most parts kids go there to drop out. They don't make it through. What do you do? And how profound is that when you realize that it's just a factory?
It starts with, we keep talking about the awareness, but my organization has been committed to parent advocacy trainings, so helping parents and community understand what quality looks like so that they're able to demand that for their child. I think what's most striking is that so often parents think they're sending their child to a school that's great. It may be the school that's been there for 20 years. Several generations may have gone through that same high school and never realized the impact that it was having on children or not having on children in terms of giving them what they needed to be college ready and ready for careers. So we have to understand what quality looks like, and then parents and community have to be part of that process of ensuring that every child has access to a high quality school.
So staying with that bullet point, dropout academies, when a school is simply not getting it done consistently, not graduating kids, what then happens? Because there's been no accountability for that. Right,
and I agree that part of this is part of an overall strategy, and if a strategy is to have an unyielding commitment to closing down schools that aren't performing, redesigning them, closing them down, and realizing that it's not about incremental change. We're going to do something radical. We're going to replace out the staff, we're going to replace out the principal, and we're going to replace out the whole curriculum and pedagogy behind that, so you virtually start over with higher expectations and new standards.
But here's what happens. We see it time and time again. You have a bad school, you close it down, the community says, oh my God, don't close our school, it's our school. And it's a bad school. How do you change that mentality?
Waiting for Superman was really, really important in terms of that. Also, the movie The Lottery by Madeline Sackler from Connecticut. They both showed what happens when you have poor performing schools and you allow those to go on. Our kids grow up uneducated, filling up the prisons and other types of things. So we have to get this mentality in our society that's unacceptable, and that we're not going to rally just to support failing schools. And it's a mindset, and we haven't come to grips with that. And the mindset actually is not set just by the community, but it's set by the political climate. For example, charter schools in Connecticut, which are demonstrating clearly that they can drive kids to a higher level, for 3 years have gone unfunded in terms of increases. The expectation is they won't be funded for another 2 years in terms of increases because the state has a budget crisis.
So what does that tell you? Can you raise a good point? If you have success and the state won't fund it, what does that say? Is there
We're not serious. We're not serious. We're having these conversations, but when you look at where success is and you're not supporting it, you're not funding it, you're not giving choice to parents, then you're not serious. You're just having these conversations. The state just finished a really, hopefully, their ad hoc committee on school financing and education. They came out with a very, very beautiful report. And I hope that the state gets behind that and starts to demonstrate that it's committed to doing those things that are going to improve these dropout schools.
Let's look at the highlights real quick of the movie. Jimmy, you have a point to me. Let's look at some of the highlights, the dropout academies. Poor schools, do poor schools contribute to poor communities, or do poor communities make poor performing schools?
Yeah, it's I think, and I think I've heard it many times. I think Joe Klein down in New York categorized it. If we're, it was, many people believe that we're going to fix the education system, you have to fix poverty. And it's really the other way around. In order to fix poverty in low-income status and lower communities, you have to fix the educational system. And it's about leadership. The Governor's Commission came out yesterday with a broad range of recommendations. One, and the leading one, was how do we create overriding leadership? Does somebody be committed to that, so what you were talking about, owning it and setting the stage and setting the platform, so this is a real and number one priority for Connecticut?
Well, parents are rising up now saying, listen, we'll take leadership. Danielle?
Yeah, last year we watched in our state legislation pass that for the first time through the parent trigger provision gave parents more say in the decision making at their schools, and ultimately leads to them having the opportunity to demand that a school is reconstituted and made into a high performing good school. That grew out of parents being frustrated and tired of not having options. So we have to, one, make sure that parents understand what to demand, and then when they do, we have to continue to support when parents exercise their right to choose options that are better for their children. And then, as Jim mentioned, we have to be really vigilant about closing those schools that are not high performing so that we are able to put the resources where they're doing the most good for children.
30 seconds, getting rid of bad teachers. Let's put it out there. The documentary pointed out very clearly, tenure is a big problem. Poor performing teachers, almost impossible to get rid of them outside of a criminal act. How do you change that?
Well, I think, you're starting to see it in a number of things as part of the race to the top. As we start figuring out how reform works, we're going to have some sort of evaluation of teachers that includes data, that includes analysis of student achievement, and I think that's a key starting to that. The toughest part about that is how do you get that so all of the players and the constituency are on board with that, and there is a movement towards that. And one of the hardest things Connecticut has to do now is get a system in place to do that and move forward with that very quickly. All
right, we're going to take a break and come back. And when we do come back, folks, we're joined by a Hartford parent advocate, Millie Arjunitis, who will tell us about a movement she's starting to empower parents to become more vocal about their schools. Don't go away.